Welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina.
A podcast sparking discussion on all things health, mindset, fitness, goals, and motivation.
We strive to help you to boost your confidence, to take the lead in your own life, to back yourself, and to step into your full potential. Body and Beyond is proudly sponsored by The Seed Cycle. The Seed Cycle is a beautiful female-founded Australian company. Seed cycling is a natural methodology that you can use to support your menstruation and your ovulation, and it can even be used to support your hormones through perimenopause and menopause. Use the code BODYANDBEYOND at the Seed Cycle website www.theseedcycle.com.au.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice, myself, and Gina. How are you feeling today, Gina?
Oh, so positive today. Thanks, Al.
Seeing as today's topic that we are chatting about is positivity versus toxic positivity.
Yes.
So where do we want to kick off? Should I
Toxic positivity. I feel like it's getting a lot of mention in media, social media at the moment. So it's quite a prevalent topic. Toxic positivity. Do you want to kick us off with a definition?
Yeah, I might read through two different definitions, actually. Okay. So this is the first one that I've got up. Toxic positivity involves dismissing negative emotions and responding to distress with false reassurances rather than empathy. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, it's important, first of all, to see that, like, as humans, we have emotions, right? So this is part of the issue, I think, is when we look at emotions being a positive emotion or a negative emotion rather than just seeing and accepting it as an emotion. So, like, looking at that definition to start with, it's even mentioned negative emotions, which is labeled certain emotions, and commonly those certain emotions may be, I don't know, sadness or anxiousness or, you know, those kind of things which can be labeled as negative emotions, when really they're just part of the human experience. They're just emotions that we feel. And in fact, when we have a reference point of sadness, for example, that enables us or allows us to feel happiness, to feel the highs of happiness. Yeah. If we have something to compare to, a comparison of the lows of sadness.
Yeah. Okay. So let me read the second one then. This one's a little bit different. Toxic positivity is the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. So that's a little bit different, right? Because that is more so stating, well, not talking about negative emotions as such, but more so stating that you're constantly staying in the same optimistic state regardless of what's actually going on in any situation, right? So you're not really, I guess, responding to situations authentically, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
But rather just sort of choosing to be optimistic throughout all experiences and probably not really feeling authentic emotions that are popping up with what's going on. So
and I think today it's really important that we look at the self, so looking at ourselves and how potentially people may show signs of toxic positivity when it comes to the self, and then also when it comes to others. So starting with the self, it's potentially not allowing ourselves to feel our feelings, or for an individual, if they're not allowing themselves to feel their feelings and they're sweeping them under the rug, or they're disregarding the reason that feeling's coming to the surface, or the reason they're feeling that way, and completely pushing that to the side and masking it or putting a band-aid solution of positivity on the situation or on the way they're feeling, or reframing it. So that would be an example of that being a potentially detrimental way for the individual to function or do toxic positivity. When it comes to others, like a common example of toxic positivity, maybe, if you've just gone through a massive breakup, and if I was to say something along the lines of oh, he was no good for you anyway. Now you're going to be able to find the true love of your life. Like, it's okay, you'll get over it. Just having no empathy in that moment and just seeing the positive side and almost pushing aside your human experience that's happening right now, and not really giving you the time and space to feel your feelings and talk through what you're feeling, and just listening with empathy, but rather kind of reframing it.
Yeah, and basically just dismissing really what true emotions are popping up. And you said something earlier than when we were chatting actually about your voice versus the voice in your head. Sorry, can you explain that again? Because that might relate into a little bit about how you're actually feeling versus what you're trying to tell yourself, and why you're trying to tell yourself, that you're not feeling that way, or you're trying to be positive about a negative experience, right?
Yeah, sure. So this would be, more so when we're looking at ourself or trying to positively reframe or flip an experience. So we've got the voice in our head. So we've got our self-talk, or the voice in our head that commonly you'll hear. Then you've got the thing that hears the voice. So your conscious ability to hear that voice in your head. And then the layer on top of that is our ability to actually be the observer. So witness not only the voice in our head, but also the voice that hears the voice in our head.
Yes.
And what were you saying in regards to that? So when it comes to the self?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to being aware of your emotions and how you're really feeling, and trying to be aware of toxic positivity, or if you're trying to, if you are going through a situation and you're trying to dismiss how you're really feeling, I guess that sort of explains, that voice in your head is not actually you, and likewise the feeling as well is also not you. It's really just something that your body's experiencing, as a reaction to whatever situation that you're in, right? So it's not something that you should try to talk yourself out of or try to cover up for whatever reason. I mean, I guess it's probably worth talking about why do you think people would try to avoid or cover up or utilize toxic positivity, I guess? It could be to do with, we do live in a world where we do chat a lot about positive thinking and seeing situations the glass half full. I don't know, is there any other reasons that you could think of possibly that might draw someone into toxic positivity, like why they would want to think that way or avoid feelings?
Yeah. I think it's important as well to not be too negative towards toxic positivity, or because for some people, they're running it as a coping mechanism. So for example, if they've gone through a really traumatic or hard time in their life, and their coping mechanism for getting through those hard times, those horrible experiences or whatever it was for them, if their coping mechanism is overtly doing positivity, like so much that it's their way of trying to see the world, we want to kind of have empathy to that as well. So usually there's a reason why someone is doing that toxic positivity or being overly positive to their own life or to others. Potentially as well, if someone's like being overly positive to another person and not listening and not having empathy and kind of just trying to reframe another person's experience for them, it may also be because they're feeling uncomfortable with the topic or the emotions that are coming up for that other person. So rather than being present and listening and just being there for them, if this was a friend in one instance or a colleague, they're actually feeling uncomfortable potentially with that topic that's coming up and trying to sweep it under the rug once again and go and reframe it.
Yeah. I can see that. So then on the flip side of toxic positivity, we have positivity, obviously. And there's still so much to be said around how we can implement that into our life too, right? In a good way, without going into the gray zone or going into toxic positivity, which is probably the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I would say. So how do you feel we could determine the difference between whether something is positive, coming from a place of being neutral, or if it's toxic positivity? Like, how would we know? How do you think people can differentiate the difference?
When it comes to the toxic positivity, like we were saying before, it's kind of disregarding your feelings or labeling emotions or feelings as good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative. And then artificially doing the positive, what's perceived as positive, compared to, I think you had a good example in regards to if you're feeling a little bit down or a little bit tired or a little bit run down, but you probably give the example of this afternoon.
Yeah.
And pulling yourself out of that.
Yeah. Well, then I feel like that could be positivity used in a good light in a way. But then, so if I explain that example in a second, but I guess I feel that it would be coming from a more neutral place, you know, so coming from a place of feeling neutral and then leaning towards including positivity and positive thinking into your life in that way, as opposed to using it as a cover up over dealing with a situation.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's definitely the difference I feel between positive thinking and then positive thinking when you don't want positive thinking. So my short example to you earlier was just so simple, but basically this morning, waking up feeling a little under the weather from going out last night and having a couple too many drinks. And initially I woke up and I thought, oh, you know, I'm just going to sack the day off. I'm feeling lazy. I'm feeling tired. But then obviously I also had this other feeling inside me that was like, actually, no, I think you would feel better if you got up and you did a couple of those things that you wanted to do today. And so for me, it was a case of I could either go down either route, and it was going to be a case of what I was going to tell myself. Do you know what I mean? It's that conversation that I'm having in my head, whether I'm going to go down the more like positive route of actually I'm feeling okay. Yeah. I really don't feel that tired. I think I've just told myself that I'm going to be tired because I was feeling like I had a bit of a hangover early this morning. And telling myself that, I just don't feel it today. I'm just going to sack it off and do nothing. But then on the other hand, I had a short conversation with myself and actually just kind of questioned that and thought, is that actually how I feel? Or do I actually want to get up and I want to do something? I want to go to the gym and train later today. So for me, like, it was more of a coaching myself into a positive space of feeling like, actually, I do feel good. And actually, this is going to make me feel even better. Yeah. And kind of just giving myself that positive energy to get going, right? Yeah. And get it done. So that definitely was coming from a little more of a neutral place though, rather than, if I had woke up feeling awful for whatever reason, something was going on, then that would probably be a different scenario. Yeah.
And I think that the key thing there is it deliberate? So are you deliberately using positivity to move yourself closer towards your goals and what, your intention for the day? Or is it completely unconscious and not deliberate? And that's where it's potentially stepping into that unconscious toxic positivity that's out of your awareness.
Yeah.
And someone's running. I actually really like I think that could be a really good example with what I mentioned before around looking at our thoughts, the voice in the head versus what hears the voice versus actually having or being the observer or the witness. Could we break that down again, Alice, for the listeners? So in that example, you're waking up in the morning, the voice in your head said, like, I'm feeling tired.
Yeah, no, well, I'm feeling hungover.
I'm feeling hungover.
I'm hungover. And yeah, I don't feel like I want to, I'm not going to do anything today. I don't feel good.
And you said like sack off the day, as in have a lazy day sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
That was just, like I'm just going to sack off the day now. But it was more of a place of I'm going to have to sack off the day because I don't feel good.
Yeah. And then the cool thing is you were able to hear that voice in your head, but not identify with it. So you didn't go, this is how I'm feeling. You were able to see that is a voice in your head, as in that's your subconscious talking to you. And then you were able to bring awareness to that. You were able to hear the voice and see that was a voice in your head, but it actually isn't you. Then you could make the conscious decision based on your goal. Like you've got a massive comp coming up, don't you? In like 4 months.
Yeah.
So it's like in relation to actually moving closer towards your goal, you were able to hear the voice, push it aside, have a conversation with yourself. And what did you say to yourself?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess I just thought to myself, actually, let's just think about it for a second. Do I actually feel that bad? Like, because you know how sometimes you can, I personally do experience this a lot. Sometimes it's even motivation. Like, this is a big thing. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure what's happening to the screen here.
The light. There we go.
This is a big one, and it probably moves into a motivation a lot, because I do get the question a lot, like, how do you stay motivated to do something or go to the gym? And the answer is always like, I'm not always motivated. But coaching myself through positive self-talk is still something that I utilize on those days.
Yeah.
To actually get me to go to the gym. And most of the time it works. Like I end up feeling really good, and then just going, oh, actually, you know what? I've told myself I feel better, and now I feel better.
Yeah.
Versus telling myself that I'm hungover, I'm tired, I don't want to do anything, and now I'm gonna have to slack off the day. Yeah. You know, these voices popping in my head. But then that's what I'm telling myself. But I could also completely have a day, you know, where it was positive. I'm feeling good. I'm actually not hungover, by the way. I actually feel fine now.
Yeah.
And I could get those things done and feel good about it. So, and
this is the thing, like with practice, we all have the ability to strengthen that, right? So it's noticing that initial voice in our head, and this could be a really good practice for everyone listening, but notice that initial voice in your head, and then be able to bring awareness to that and observe that, and then make a conscious decision as to how you're going to move forward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing as well, like giving yourself, if there is a given day where you genuinely check in and you go, I need to rest, giving validity to that as well. And we're not saying you need to push through every day you feel like you need to rest, but it's having that flexibility and being deliberate.
Yeah. And I think as well, coming, like I sort of said, it when it does come from a bit more of a neutral place, like, because for an example, there will be days where I do feel down, for example. So I'm not motivated. It's probably most likely hormone related, that time of the cycle. And I'm sure many women can relate to those couple of days where you tend to just go, you wake up and you're like, I'm not really feeling it today. Like, why? And then you kind of realize, oh, yeah, same time of the month. Like, you can kind of tell yourself, oh, well, probably normal. But there's definitely days that I would wake up and feel that and just feel just down, or like a little bit less kind of, I don't know, happier, right?
Yeah.
And on those days, it's important to like acknowledge that in a way that, like, sometimes I will try coach myself into that better state and it doesn't work, right? But then that's when you realize, oh, okay, no, actually I just need to sit with this feeling, and it does need to be a day of just feeling a bit meh, you know? So I feel like it can definitely, it's probably being aware of, you know, whether you're in a state where you can utilize positive thinking and you can coach yourself out of it and it's fine, and and it works, and you end up feeling great, or there's always going to be times where, you know, you realize, actually, no, I kind of just need to feel this way right now.
Yeah, totally. And giving, acknowledging and giving validity to, like, not everyone's going to be, not every day is going to be the best day or the most optimal day or the most productive day. And knowing that as humans, we have natural peaks and troughs in energy. Yes, hormones come into that as well, you know, looking at sleep and everything else that's going on in stress, you know. All of that will play into it, and being kind to ourselves ultimately, knowing when you need to genuinely, you know, like you said, you could think positive or genuinely give yourself a kick up the bum, compared to when it's time to listen to the body and rest and recover and have downtime. Yeah. So I guess ultimately I want to ask everyone, like, are you choosing your response of positivity or negativity or neutralness, like Alice mentioned? Is it a choice? Is it in your awareness, or is it a habit? Have you habitually created this way of seeing the world, this filter or this lens?
Yeah. And also, not only might it just be a habit as well, but it's also, I think, about becoming aware of your emotions and that they are just emotions, and actually being aware of what you really do feel deep down, right? Because like you said, if it's a habit that you're constantly trying to override emotions or feelings, and you're trying to just constantly be positive, but you know, in some cases that could end up you basically bottling up how you're really feeling. That's something you want to become aware of, I guess. Yeah. So when you are going through whatever situations you might be in, just asking yourself, I guess being able to identify if you are, sorry, the light's gone funny, if you are practicing toxic positivity.
Yeah. Maybe put your head in the gap of the windows. That's it. Yeah. And
oh
then.
God, it works. There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
This office is just
so shiny. It's so much sunlight.
It's too bright in here. I need to close the curtains. It's quite frustrating. Anyway.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is that, you know, I think I've referred to this in previous podcasts, but we all have different ways of seeing the world, different thinking patterns. They're also known as meta programs. So one of those thinking patterns or meta programs is actually scenario type. So it's looking at, on one end of the spectrum of the thinking pattern, one end of the spectrum is pessimism or being pessimistic or worst case scenario. Then on the other end of the spectrum is optimism or best case scenario. So this is also where you could look at the negativity versus positivity being on ends of the spectrum. So what's pretty cool is that people who, you know, we could see them as more negative people, or, you know, this, you know, in general, the more negative kind of people, but pessimistic worst case thinkers, they're actually, you know, really good at looking for problems. So for example, if they're in a certain field or, you know, position or for work where their job is to identify where are the problems, where are the issues, you know, and being able to see those problems and issues, they're actually really still important people in society, right? So they're highly skilled at looking for the difference, looking for danger, looking for threats, obstacles, difficulties, and challenges. So you can see that it's actually a way of seeing reality. These kind of people as well, they're really good at focusing on problems, and they will often, they foreground, or what they prioritize or what they see are problems, dangers, threats, and difficulties, right? Compared to someone on the other end of the spectrum who's an optimistic best case scenario kind of person, and they're looking for challenges to deal with, opportunities to master, doors to new possibilities, chances to grow. Those people are more optimistic, hopeful, goal-inspired, and empowered. And they're often looking for the good in things. So, you know, a little example could be if it's completely pitch black and you're walking down a dark alley, the person who's more negative or pessimistic or worst case scenario, that kind of thinker, they're going to be on guard. They're going to be ready to tackle any danger that comes at them. They're going to have their phone held tightly. They might even have a key or a weapon ready to fight an intruder, or if someone comes and attacks them, right? Whereas someone who might be on the other end of the spectrum and they're super optimistic, they're kind of best case scenario, they're going to have their headphones in, they're going to be walking down that dark alley, like nothing's going to happen. They're completely untouchable, right?
Yeah.
So those are both each extreme end of the spectrum. And so the beauty and the balance is being able to lean on both ends of the spectrum, like you were saying, Al, being able to be positive when necessary and lean into that side, but also being able to be more pessimistic or worst case scenario when that's required as well.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like that balance is important. I could definitely see myself sitting on the positive end of the stick, and I could definitely see you there too. That's definitely something that I think I probably see the good in most things, or try to. I naturally do. Whereas if I were to use an example, Warren is probably very different in the way that he's probably on the other side of the stick than me. So we often see things, you know, in just through different lenses, which is quite interesting. You know, I might see something exactly the same happen at the exact same time, and just two different takeaways from that instance, right? Just someone who's, you know, more primed at looking for the negative or the dangers, and then there's me more primed to looking at, what was the good thing about it, or what might have happened like in a good way. So it's quite interesting, like thinking about how our experiences in life do really shape that lens individually for each of us. So.
Exactly. And that can also be, taken back to the way we were brought up as children, the kind of environment we lived in. So a good example is like if Warren grew up in South Africa, which is traditionally a bit more of a potentially a more dangerous country, that like they had to be on their guard, right? For to live, to survive, they had to be a little bit more cautious, right? Whereas here in Australia, of course, there's less optimal areas, but generally, you and I would have grown up a bit safer potentially as a general comment, right? So
absolutely. And more trusting of people around you, and of trusting of authority and, protective figures around you as well. Whereas I think for him as well, that would have been a different experience. So it's quite interesting, to see how that definitely would shape the way that you see situations, I guess.
Yeah.
But in a great way, right? Like, in that neither is good or bad, right? Like you just said, it's just different.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I wanted to put forward was noticing when we are associating with our emotions or when we are making I am statements. So for example, I am sad, I am happy, I am anxious. So making those statements as opposed to saying I'm experiencing happiness or I'm experiencing sadness, I'm experiencing anxiousness. Anxiousness is a good one, right? Because it's a normal human emotion. It's normal to be anxious at different stages of life, of the day, given certain scenarios. And it's also normal to feel sadness and happiness, So noticing those things as things we experience rather than identifying with them as I am statements. And it sounds like a funny thing to say because I know it's such a normal part of our language to say I am sad, I am happy. Whereas really, as humans, we are human and we experience sadness. We are not sad. Like sad is an emotion. And it sounds a bit wanky to say it, right? Because it's just our language. It's just how we talk in Australia, like saying I am sad. But it can be a powerful thing to try and just think about and just kind of see emotions as something we're doing. It's not permanent. Like you're not stuck being sad. It makes it a little bit more flexible. It makes it a little bit more temporary as well. We can see emotions as something that happens, it passes through us. We can also give it time and space and acknowledge that emotion. And also it's really important as well to reflect on the why. Like, why are we experiencing this emotion? Is there something underlying that we need to actually truly deal with? And not just sweep under the rug, like I've mentioned so many times today already.
It's very similar to like what we mentioned before. I can't remember what podcast it was, but we were chatting about just giving yourself labels as such, So it's the same thing, like labeling yourself as a sad person or a happy person or which you're not, either of those things, and you can't be either of those things. You can experience those emotions, but you're not that as a person. Similarly to goals, or labeling yourself as a lazy person or someone who can't eat healthy or someone who can't get up to go to the gym. Exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I am lazy. That's a very static comment. It's not saying I'm being lazy. I'm being a bit lazy today. That's temporary. I am lazy is an identity statement. Like I am a lazy person. Also, someone saying I am fat. It's static. It's not letting you see that you have fat or I have fat. We all have fat. We are not fat. Even if someone's obese, like they don't need to identify and say I am fat. They can say that I have extra fat, or so it's just looking at how we identify, and are we making static statements, or I am dumb. How challenging is that? So many people think like that. I'm stupid, rather than seeing flexibility and the possibility of we can change. Change is open to every single human.
Agree.
Like, our brain can change. Our brain is plastic. And so looking at that identity, coming back again to positive or negative, someone saying I'm a positive person and that being part of their identity could potentially leaning into that toxic positivity, because that's who they see themselves to be, or who they take themselves to be, being positive. So then what happens?
Being a negative person, right?
Yeah. Same with being a negative person. But for that toxic positive person, the person who sees themselves as being positive, what happens when they genuinely are feeling sad?
Yeah.
Then they're no longer fitting within their identity. Like they're now not being true to themselves. So they think, rather than just allowing themselves to experience sadness or being down, they're kind of blocking that and not allowing themselves to feel that because they're a positive person.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
Definitely. I think the main overarching sort of message is really to, I guess, just be aware and understand both sides of the spectrum.
Yes.
And really what we want people to think about is to start thinking and noticing your emotions and see them as emotions, not as you as a person, or but also just ask yourself when you are moving through emotions as well, what you're truly feeling, I guess.
Yeah. Giving yourself time and space to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
Rather than just trying to mask it with positivity. Yeah. And also when it comes to relating with other people, if someone is genuinely going through something, not feeling the need to have to make it a positive or give them the flip side or the positive spin, put a positive spin on it, you know? So just being empathetic and being there with that person and listening and being kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Good chat.
Love it.
Is there anything else we wanted to kind of mention while we're on this topic today?
I don't think so. Ultimately just looking at what's our practiced habitual way of being, and just for all of us just to start to notice, you know, are we putting a more positive spin on things, or are we more of a negative, seeing the world a little bit more pessimistic, worst case scenario? Just noticing that for ourselves, and also noticing that voice in our head. Is it running your world, or is it taking up more space than it needs to? Is it influencing the way you feel more than it needs to? Or are you able to start to hear that voice in your head and make a different decision?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for today's chat.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. If you liked today's episode, if you've got any questions, shoot us a message through our Body and Beyond Instagram. I think is the easiest way.
Yeah. Or in the group. So we've got a Facebook group as well. So if you want to join that, it's the Body and Beyond community. Feel free to jump in, ask any questions, make any requests on episode topics.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you.
We really are just having open chats, right? So, you know, there might be things that pop up that make you think, and you might have questions, or you might want to expand on your own experiences with something. So, you know, if that's the case, we would absolutely love to have your input, whether it be in our group, or you can just message us directly, or with any questions. Great.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
The Body and Beyond podcast is for information purposes only. This podcast does not constitute advice or services, and the statements and views of the hosts and guests are not medical advice. The information provided should not be used for treatment or diagnosis purposes. Please discuss any information from this podcast with your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle.